Hi there, and welcome to Down South Anomalies. This is episode 39. My name's Jay Katz. Here's my beautiful wife, Aspasia. How are you?
I'm very well.
And I am
Very
tired,
excited.
but so excited. It
I
is
tell you what,
frightening.
this guy's been jumping out of his skin for the last few days when he found out that we had this interview. Seriously.
So we have an extraordinary person
We
that
do.
has been very generous with her time.
Mm-hmm.
How do we pronounce that name? Please, you say it.
Auburn Salcedo.
Yes, and
Who is the co-founder of Randonautica.
And our episode is called Into the Anomalous.
Yeah.
And just before, excuse us, Auburn, we have to always state this. It's been NAIDOC week. We have a lot of stuff happening politically in our country at the moment. We're broadcasting from Sydney, Australia, but we're also on stolen land. And it's part of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation. And we have to pay our respects to elders past, present, and emerging. And we have to go forward and make sure we get that voice in Parliament for our Indigenous culture.
Absolutely.
And literally, we should be giving back this land.
Yeah, well, that's not going
to
happen.
And moving to a lonely little asteroid. But in the meantime, I know this is Down South Anomalies, but we are going global.
This is a global
because I feel in my heart of hearts, Aspasia, that this extraordinary lady and her partner, who comes from Monster Midway, Sideshow Circus,
loving it,
down the alleyway, have probably created an app that could change the world. And at this point in time, I doubt if anyone out there in mass culture, especially in the Western side of our culture, is even aware that an app could be this powerful.
Yeah.
And it's become a controversial thing out in the marketplace, but it is an astounding thing. So it is such a pleasure to have you with us, Auburn.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited.
It is an astounding app. Can you maybe take us back to when this all began and tell us about that story? Because I believe you were a director of television. And how do you come together with a circus performer to create this app that is so profound?
Yeah, it is a very synchronistic story, how it all, looking back now even, I'm just like, wow, that all pieces together so perfectly, but you don't know when you're in it. But I actually am a serial entrepreneur. So I've always just looked for like businesses. And then that was really my mindset, was like, oh, I like business. But then there was a part of me that got really pulled into spirituality and higher consciousness, and very much thinking about like what's outside of, this box of our mind. And so I actually, in 2018, started doing random adventures, and I would flip a coin in my car. And if the coin landed on heads, I would take a left. And if it landed on tails, I would take a right. And I would just let it take me off the beaten path. And it was just this thing that I did. And I never really thought anything of it. And when I would tell people, they're like, that sounds like a waste of time. And I'm like, no, it feels really good to do, actually. Like, it does something for me and I love it and I do it. So then about a year later, I was on Reddit and I had stumbled across my now ex-partner, Josh. He was actually on Reddit and he was talking about how there is a group of guys that are talking about the derive, like Guy Debord's drive, and randomness, and how it affects humans' ability to basically like observe reality and possibly have an effect on the holistic world. So I was like, oh my gosh, this is like right up my alley. I love randomness. I love being able to see like things that I wouldn't have normally seen before. I'm already into Wooville, and I was starting to deep dive into some quantum theory and just was highly interested in it. So I end up in this Telegram chat. I'm the only woman. And there's all of these mad scientists and brilliant developers and engineers. And they're just kind of going after this idea of like, let's send people random coordinates and see what happens when they go to those random coordinates. And these just aren't like random, like a random, it's true randomness. So we use a quantum random number generator to actually create like a truly random point, which I can explain to you how we do that. But essentially, I'm watching this unfold and thinking, this is unreal. Like people are coming back with like these very surreal stories and epiphanies and having these really meaningful experiences because they're thinking like the idea is to think about something, right? Before you go out, you set your intention. So that intention may be like, I was just in Barcelona last week and our intention was flamingo. Okay.
Mhm.
So we set our intention as flamingo and we go out to a random point and sure enough, we find a flamingo on somebody's porch, like absolutely mind blowing. So people were kind of going through this situation of like, what is this thing, right? Because it's like for those uninitiated or maybe not primed, they're very like, what's happening? And for me and my ex-partner, but Josh at the time, he was like, this has to be brought to the world. Like we have to figure out a way to do it. So I essentially, like my business background and my little woo-ness allowed me to like bring this to from kind of a very like ad hoc, lots of people working on it in and out, volunteer type of thing into like a company so that we could be on the App Store. So people could download us all over the world. And eventually it turned into this huge worldwide thing where we have had like, I think we're at like 70 million downloads total. We've been #1 in Apple and Google before. And like, I'm talking probably 500 million Randonaut trips, like people going on random adventures across the world. So that's
huge.
That's happened from 2019 to now, like all of that. And it's been very surreal, but it's incredible. Yeah. That's
It is.
background.
The app in itself is a profound phenomena, and it's affected so many people in so many different ways. I guess what we should do is explain to our audience, and we've got a large audio audience as well, who Guy Debord was and the situation is, and the fact that you brought in with that random numbers generator, you've actually brought in chaos theory and you've collided it with Debord's theory of the derived, which I think was around 1955, before the situationist movement. And Debord, as an author and filmmaker, is famous for an astounding work called The Society of the Spectacle.
Yeah.
And he was beginning to realize that we were becoming entrenched in illusion and the veneer and not the reality of life. And I think the theory of the derived, if I've got it correct, and I'll stand corrected by you if I haven't, is about actually breaking out of ritual and routine and the mundanity of everyday life and beginning to realize that you're actually alive in the moment. And there's many things around you that you miss every day. And in a way, it's very similar to your app. It's actually creating new pathways within an area that you think you may be familiar with and reawakening you. It's very Taoist in a way. It's got a Buddhist intent in there.
Absolutely.
So I think it's important that people actually go back and look at the philosophy behind this app. And in many ways, that'll deconstruct a lot of the controversy that's occurred around this app because of people are influenced heavily by culture out there, and that's actually getting them to put the wrong things into the generator that takes them to places that actually bring about apprehension and fear.
Well, I think sometimes too is like if they actually don't understand the concept of putting intent out there, that they or they don't believe it. You know what I mean? They're like, oh well, let's. I've seen some, and they're like, oh let's find murder. You know what I mean? And it's like, and then they, some people have stumbled onto some really.
You've got to watch what you wish for.
Well, that's the thing, and I think because they don't really believe or understand what this thing is that whatever you put out, quite possibly could come back to you.
So maybe what we'll talk about, and I'm sorry we've rambled on here because we're so excited.
I enjoy listening to you because you have a lot of insight.
That notion of intent is an astounding thing. And I think it's remarkable that it's there in pre-usage of this app. You have to consider intent and you have to consider respect to the property that you're going on. And all those things are clearly marked out in the usage of the app, even though a lot of the users of the app are not being that aware of what they're doing.
Yeah.
But philosophically, this notion of intent has been raised for so long in humanity that if we follow our intuition,
Mm.
if our intent is right, clarity may appear to us. So maybe if you can speak a little bit more about that. And I'm sorry, that was so rambling, Auburn.
No, I mean, there's a lot in there. So we are very parallel in terms of Guy Debord's theories, because we're saying that you're in a probability tunnel. You're going to do the same thing every day, ritualistically. You're in a routine. You're programmatic. You're a meat bag algorithm, essentially. Not to say, we don't have free will, but a lot of things are highly predictable in our nature. So by adding randomness to your routine, you're able to see and experience novelty. So you're able to see, things with a different lens. Your brain actually does something psychologically differently. Like there are some studies that show that traveling into randomness actually causes your brain to basically have different circuits fire than it normally would. So it's an observational psychological thing. That's one component of it. And then when we start talking about intention, now we're dealing with like the younger generations of understanding intention, which is when I work with people I would say under the age of 30, and talk to them about intention, it's a completely different feeling and idea than people in like more of the fringe, older, they've been around for some of the more parapsychological stories, right? Like they get it. So it's probably been one of our biggest challenges to help people understand what an intention means, and how you basically we're testing this theory of like a co-creative state, like this idea that with a quantum bridge, we're somehow playing with time and space, and we're using your thoughts, which are simply subatomic particles, to react with other subatomic particles and hopefully make something tangible and observable in the holistic world. That is very hard to explain to an 18-year-old that saw it on TikTok and is like, I'm going to download this and look for something scary so I get a ton of views, right? Like it's so hard to explain. But ultimately, like what we have found is that, and you guys pointed out, there are like two groups. There are a group of people who are into like the dopamine rush videos of like the fear factor. And we did have an incident. We even had another incident recently where there has been deceased bodies found. So that happened with Pokemon Go. Like it happens. You got millions of people out adventuring there. I mean, that unfortunately exists very much. So, but it's very sensational. And then people want to see if they can replicate that. And then they could get and it's a totally different group, which unfortunately gets a lot of attention, versus the people who are more of they're curiosity seekers. They want to explore their own minds. They want to explore reality. Some people come because they're trying to grow their spirituality, or they're depressed and they want to like get out of their, their mundane of their own dark gray bubbles. So like there's lots of reasons why people use it. And it is unfortunate that the fear factor people get the most attention, but yeah, so intention is critical, and trying to teach it is very difficult. I'll tell you that. On a very global wide scale, it's difficult to do.
Excuse me, I don't think it's your job in actually teaching it. I mean, people have to be able to use.
Well, this is a tool.
It's a tool.
Right? It's a tool,
and it can be used for good or evil.
You know, any tool can be used for good or for negative. Let's not go good and evil.
Let's go
negative, positive.
You can use a knife to. You can use a knife to butter bread, or you could use a knife in a bad way, right?
Yeah. So of course,
we just want you to butter bread.
And as a parent, the growing adolescent mind,
oh my God,
is more about impulse than it is intention. It doesn't really think things through. And I think we live in a very sensationalized world. And I think Andy Warhol's got a lot to answer for, Auburn, in terms of like everyone should get their 15 minutes.
No,
I don't think everyone deserves their 15 minutes.
Seriously.
But I get a feeling that you know, I mean, you were talking about novelty there. If we look back historically at this planet and the fact that we rose up out of the quagmire, out of the mud, you know, our particles bonded together and created, as you said before, this sort of slightly electrical animated meat package that roams round. The one thing that our world has told us is that it is completely obsessed with novelty and change and adaptation and evolution, as opposed to ritualism and routine and repetition, that it is always changing. And I guess the only thing we can predict as human beings is change, that's going to occur. And we have to be prepared for that. But the greatest change that can happen to us is an intellectual change, a philosophy in the way that we approach life. And that's where I think that this app to me actually goes right back to the early 70s when they were doing peer studies at Stanford University on people's telekinesis. And they brought in Andrei Puharich and Uri Geller. They brought in numerous people. And that's where actually remote viewing began. The notion of being able to remote view sites, which we're well aware must have had some veracity, because the Defense Department, intelligence, have used it, never stopped used it, and have poured millions of dollars into it.
Billions.
But here we now have an application that can actually hone that intention down, can make people aware, in a sense, of their own intuition and the power of it. And one last thing I will say is that most neurologists now are becoming aware the consciousness doesn't necessarily appear to sit in the two separate hemispheres of the brain. The consciousness may even be outside of the body, and then we may be all tapping into it. And then we go back to Jung and Freud and the notion of the mind at large.
The world mirroring. Yes.
So I think that this is an actual extraordinary tool that the world at this stage has not really gleamed how powerful it could be, and that if you use it on a regular basis, that you might just restart the engine. That people are now going back. It's odd, that period that people are going back to the 70s. We've been working with a pharmacologist here that's dealing with depression after the last 3 years in populations in Britain and Australia. The way he's dealing with it is with psychedelics, and there's a renaissance in psychedelics, because psychedelics do
the mind.
But it also does what this app does. Have you guys had anyone's brain scanned in the midst of using this app to see if it's opening new neurological pathways?
Gosh, we haven't, but that
you should.
I feel like that would be amazing to see. We have had people, especially when we were very, very popular in 2020, 2021, a lot of people were saying that they were clinically depressed and started using Randonautica, and they don't have to take medicine anymore, or that they were struggling with obesity, food addictions, alcoholism, and they started using Randonautica. And I mean, there's a very simplistic way to say that, you start going out on adventures and you kind of change your exercise habits and such. I feel like there's more to it than that. I feel like you're changing your kind of thread, I think, a bit. I really like Philippe Guillemot. I always mispronounce his name. The Road of Time. I'm not sure if you. Okay, the way that he explains how the threads go, they basically intersect in the center, and it's just sort of this like in between space. And as this in between space, not the present, but as it breathes, like the threads move in the past and the present. And there's something about Randonautica that makes me feel like we're in an in-between when we go into that state of randomness and journeying out, and it kind of vibrates our threads, and it can change things. It can change your path. I feel that.
I think neurologically it could do an extraordinary amount of positive work.
Yes.
And I think, as you just said before, certainly changed people's life. I mean, again, another name that pops up to me is the work of Rupert Sheldrake and the morphogenic field.
Well, it's all the same.
And
Yeah.
as far as I'm aware, this is the first technological application in the hands of the public that's ever intuitively done something like this. Is that correct? Are you aware of any other applications in this regard?
The closest thing would have been probably the Global Consciousness Project's type of, where they were looking at human resonance effect on RNGs, or random number generators that they had set up all over the globe. But when we're dealing with like mind matter interaction is what we call it. I like to think of it as emotional matter interaction, like whatever our energy field, our Taurus, whatever you want to call it, is sending out, it's having an effect on matter. Like I've seen it way too many times. Like it's absolutely having an effect on consensus reality, where like people standing around you can also see the effect of it. It's not just an individual, cognitive bias. Like we can prove it. And it's beyond statistically improbable. These are like extreme anomalies. So yes, we're the first ones, and I don't know of anything that's not government, behind a government wall, that is. Sometimes I worry that we're the only one, actually, because I'm like,
no, don't worry. I think it's groundbreaking,
okay.
and I think it's in its infancy. And look, if it's an app that just gets people to consider philosophically the conundrum we get into in Western culture, which is based on comfort and our fear of change and the catastrophism that's bred into us. So, I mean, if we didn't have catastrophism, we'd never pay an insurance company a cent. So I think that we need something that marries. I mean, this to me is extraordinary, because it marries that edgy, clicky notion of modern technology to very old philosophical memes.
Right. This is very old.
Absolutely.
Can we go back to the morphogenic resonance?
Yes,
because
certainly.
I was not familiar with that until today.
Wow.
Which is crazy to me, because I feel very well researched in this field. And I'm like, how have I never seen this before? So what we call it is the memetics field. And we've seen it plenty of times where, for example, we had a red couch meme. For whatever reason, people all over the world, completely unattached from each other, started going to their random points and reporting that they were finding red couches in the middle of fields, red couches on the curb outside of houses, red couches in a dumpster. And they would take pictures of it and they would send it to us. And then we started putting it together and saying, why are so many people finding red couches everywhere, right? Like, what's going on? So we realized that, okay, the best way I think to explain it is that somehow, and I mean, this is one way, I have 10 in my head, but this intelligence field, this invisible space, it learns us too. And so it will pick up on our memory, what we're experiencing, and it will replicate it. And it does it in a way that's like, it's very natural. It's bizarre. Like, how is this happening? Like, how can this be? Like, for me, I even personally had like a mimetic experience where like every point that I got was just a single orange cone in the middle of a cornfield, one single orange cone behind these massive pallets. I had to walk for like 20 minutes to get behind. My point is one single orange construction cone. 10 more of them. And we're not doing anything obviously with that. It's just a random quantum random number generator. Like, why is this happening? And it's this very like co-creative state. It's where like I feel it's outside of me, but it's inside of me at the same time. It's like breathing, it's breathing. And so when I read about the morphogenic resonance, right? I'm saying that right?
Yep.
And how your memories resonate and they basically can come into full play again based on your past, which I think it has to do with the future too. But this idea that like, what are we touching there that is causing something in the past? Even with Randonautica, you go out, you go on this adventure, you see this particular thing, and then you do it again 6 months later and you see the same thing, you have the same experience, you have the same feelings. Why are the memories and the emotional resonance sticking so well? Is it because we're touching the subatomic? Is it because we're creating a quantum bridge? Is it because we're playing around with this deeper, how is that happening? So that just really stuck with me. And I'm so glad you guys brought it up, because it was I watched 2 of his videos before this call, and I was like, oh, this is what I've been trying to explain, even in my own personal life. How I'm having situations like every 3 years, this particular thing occurs, like, and it's all the same emotions and all the same characters. It's like, wow, it's crazy. So resonance is very, I think, a massive part of what's going on here with Randonautica.
I totally couldn't agree with you more. And Sheldrake is an extraordinary researcher and academic that has been peer reviewed and found that this is a latent force in all of us. And I think what you said before, those 3 things, I think it ticks all those boxes. And I think it really is something that could reawaken shamanistic experiences in all of us, to make us realize that we're part of a huge living mass. And in that way, it can only create good. It's that introspection and awareness that we have to respect everything living around us.
That we are like
and everything
really connected.
interacts.
We're
Really,
on a really deep level, we are connected, and if maybe we understood that a little bit better, we wouldn't be so mean to each other all the time.
And that notion of the quantum effect, the
absolutely.
particles can have this synchronistic relationship and yet be light years apart. And so,
unfortunately, I think in the West we use that word, coincidence to just, dismiss things that really we should think more deeply about. Why is this happening? Why does this keep coming up to me? You know what I mean?
Well, I believe as a mother, as a bearer of life, and you have always shown that astounding intuition.
I have.
And maybe you should just recant to Auburn your way. Asper is a mad recycler. And so it gets very hard for a female of the species to be seen over 30, 40, 50. Now, you take a female of the species that's out there going through the garbage bins.
The recycling bins, come on.
To find, bottles. That's how you put our grandson through dance school.
Absolutely. Look, but even I used to work at a reuse centre, and I used to be the creative designer there. So we would get things from industry like off-cuts and overruns, and instead of them going to landfill, we would sell them to artists and anybody who needed them. And my job was to actually make things out of these things, so and show people that you could make all sorts of things, and instead of going and buying brand new stuff, you could just create stuff out of this stuff that would go to landfill. Anyway, so whenever I needed something, I would just put it out there into the universe, and sure enough, every single time it would turn up on my doorstep. I've needed things for a particular project, and I'd never worry. I just put it out there, and I know it will come to me in the most bizarre ways ever. And I've always lived like that. We even when we stopped working in the nursing homes, because that's where we met, in nursing homes, we decided to go out there and, you know, be entertainers. And, you know, we just thought, you know, we don't have like a regular job. We haven't had a regular job that we go to Monday to Friday, you know, every week in and week out. We have been living like this since 1996, and we know that it's the universe is going to provide for us, that we will get what we need,
Not
what we want.
But what we need.
The universe provides you with what you need, not what you want. And I just give it up to it, and I just let it happen. I don't worry about anything anymore.
If I can be the epitaph at the end there. Classic example last week, we stumbled onto the fact that we're missing one of Jung's most important books on synchronicity. It's just called Synchronicity. And I said it to Asma as she left the door to go recycling.
Yep.
She came back with that book.
I came back with the book. Somebody had put it in the recycling bin. And there, I opened the bin, and there it was.
Isn't
and I was
that
like,
amazing?
Oh my God. And I brought it home and I said, hey, look at this. It was, and it's like, that's beyond coincidence.
Oh,
Seriously.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And so
beyond.
that's it. That's a part of you. And you've done that for so long that it's able to continue to replicate, right?
Yes.
For others, they don't know any of that. They don't. They don't even understand like the comprehension of that story for someone that's never happened to. It's just purely benediction. They've never experienced it. They're just hearing your story, right? So I hope and I believe that this is what is happening, is that even the most closed-minded, skeptical people are having these tiny little moments
Epiphanies,
of finding
I'm sure they are.
And in doing so, I mean, I'm certain they are. And in doing so, I mean, my hope is that will just grow, right?
Yes.
I mean, this should just keep growing, and it is.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think, you know, what I wanted to entitle the program is The App That Will Change the World.
Oh my gosh, I hope so.
And, you know, I feel that in my heart, and all the other noise around it, the controversy around it, and the trouble that occurs around it, and people just using that app to get millions of clicks because of the sensationalism attached to it.
I tell them better stop doing that.
Well, you know, they'll get what they deserve.
And you know, they don't realize how absurd the conundrum they are in. I have witnessed, I went into all the noise around the signal, Auburn, and I witnessed what was at times reasonably entertaining, sometimes fairly mundane, but people sort of having this, trying to suss out who is behind Randonautica.
Oh yeah, that was hilarious.
And like, you know,
it's
there's
the Illuminati.
It's a cult.
I mean,
it's some person traveling us. They're photographing us. They're taking our data.
Yeah, but I heard one guy. He was like, they follow. You know, they've got people out there, and I'm thinking, this is a worldwide. You know, a worldwide app. Doesn't matter where you are. So So you've got, Randonautica has got, I don't know how many people.
It's worse than Google Earth mapping.
You have to have them everywhere.
We have 7 people on our team.
No. You have to have at least 7 billion to be doing what people say you're doing.
It's crazy.
It's so funny. Our Emily on our team, she handles all of kind of like our customer inquiry, our user questions and everything. And they'll be like, we know that you followed us. We know that you planted that stuff. Like there's no other way this could happen. And she's like, tell me how that is possible, because it's not. And it's hilarious. She'll read their stories to us and it just cracks us up. But sometimes people will find their, very precisely find things like, I remember a girl, she had set out to find something that would remind her of her grandmother that had passed away. And her point put her on a gravestone that had her grandmother's first name and her middle name.
Right.
This was so shocking to her that she sent us so many messages trying to essentially convince herself and us that we are using Google satellites,
right.
to look down on the entire earth and find things that are specific to what they're thinking. Like,
Gee whiz, what was your startup fund? It must have been in the trillions.
it was zero, and it's still
I mean,
zero.
what
We have
was the
no
startup fund?
working, we have no funding. So I'm like, it's those people though that it's sometimes it's hard to see, you know, their minds really can't wrap their head
No,
around it.
no.
And but for the most part, I do see that people either kind of it eases its way out of their system naturally, you know, like how long do you hold on to something like that, or it opens them up to more, you know. I mean, that's something that's like that can become a core memory for somebody who's never experienced like a true synchronicity, or, you know, manifesting, or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, but no, we're not planting things anywhere. We're not
How can you? How
in
can
vans.
you?
We don't have drones. We don't have helicopters. Like we're not tracking your phone. We don't know what your intention is. Nothing. It's all just the quantum.
You should be both putting this in a script. There's not just another book there. There's a mini series and there's a feature film, because I think those stories need to be collected and documented, because in a way, it's not the app. It's the person operating the app that needs to take responsibility for themselves.
Absolutely.
It's just like saying, I went into a bar and that alcohol got me drunk. You know, and
well, you know,
it's so irresponsible and so ridiculous, and not looking at how profoundly this could change your life for the better. And anything that considers to respect all those things around us and to pay more attention. I mean, it's just, it truly excites me where this app is going to go.
So how do you think if people had this app and they used it to go squatching?
Well, this is what I want to talk to you about. This is what we're building up to here, because we sit in the
you know, we actually don't have mobile phones.
We don't own a mobile phone.
We've never had one.
Because of the landfill.
But
you know what? I'm going to make sure everyone I know that has one has got that app, and I'm going to be using it with them. But I'm just not going to take responsibility to own a phone.
You guys are naturally able to do
well. That's
you know, we're creating. We're basically, you know, at least I think, trying to create the tool. So, but the tool is already within you and you're experiencing it. So,
and there's the truth. And so Auburn and your other co-founder and everyone working behind the scenes there, all 5 others of them, can never be held responsible for human beings' action on this. And what I was going to say, do you mind me digressing back? As a mother, as a bearer of life, you'd be so aware of that there is that link to your child is beyond explanation. That link and love and ability to understand where they're at emotionally is so beyond explanation. It is literally the mind at large. And I hear incredibly intuitive things where my wife will say something and the next minute we phone up and find that is happening to that person. And that's the depth of her emotion and love for her children and her grandchildren.
It's that, or it's just, you know, tapping into something that's there that we don't really, do you know what I mean? Like, I truly believe that there is something outside of us that we can tap into. And, you know, that intuition, that feeling that somebody's watching you, that feeling that, you know that this person's going to contact you, that's beyond coincidence.
Sheldrake did studies
it happens,
on that.
You know, when it happens, you know, all the time. And some of it is like, you know, it's really bizarre. You know, we like even yesterday, we've got a friend that we hadn't heard of, and for a long, long time, and we were worried about them, and we kept ringing and leaving messages. And then, you know, Jamie said, I'm going to ring him today and I'm going to get him. And he did. Do you know what I mean? And it had been more than, it'd been more than a year now.
Their child had been very ill.
Their child had been very ill, and they just couldn't understand, you know, they couldn't contact us because they were dealing with so much stuff and, you know, blah, blah, blah. But it was like yesterday, he said, I'm going to ring him and I'm going to get him, and he did. He actually answered. And it's like, that was, I think that kind of thing all the time is like, I understand that there is something out there that is intuition that and I think sometimes we don't rely on it more than what we do, because it's always dismissed as coincidence. And so don't worry about it. Just
Can
let
I
it go.
ask you guys a question
Mhm.
regarding this? So I've started to feel more so in the past couple of years, it's like access to time, like being in a vibratory state that somehow gives you expansion in time. So like, for instance, with your book, the Freud book, could it be that you brought it up because future you already found it?
Maybe. Who knows?
And because we just have a little bit of sense outside of our current time, just a little sense beyond it, we start to get these spidey senses, these things that let us say things before that happen, the feeling occurs before it happens. We are seeing into the future, but it all just kind of feels like it's a synchronicity, but really it's just like our ability, our like probably innateness, right? Like, is that possible? Do you see that?
That's quite, absolutely.
I absolutely see that. And I think what you raised with the Consciousness Project actually saw that as well. And they did see incredible peaks during world events there. And, Sheldrake spoke about that extensively. And I think it is a sense of like there's a time dilation. I mean, time is a very human concept. I don't know if you ever saw that David Avery a ghost story where he actually used the conceit of a ghost in a sheet. It's an extraordinary film from 2017.
Amazing.
And it's got a very long, protracted beginning where time is really delayed and then it speeds up rapidly. It literally goes through centuries and generations.
And it goes backwards and forwards.
And again, I think it's an unconscious...
It's called A Ghost Story.
A Ghost Story.
It's the most beautiful movie. I mean, it was just such an amazing and profound movie. And
I would love to interview him one day and ask him if that was a conscious rendering in that script or if this is just something intuitively that came out. You'd be aware that when technological leaps occur, like this app, that things... You go to the patent office and you find that there are 3 or 4 individuals in separate parts of the world without any sort of recognition or knowledge of each other that all of a sudden put in a patent for the birth of radio, Tesla and Marconi, and things like that occur virtually at the same time. And so in a sense,
it's like something that they're, I don't know, tapping into some sort of I call it the source field. I really do.
But we have needed in the West, especially with our lack of spiritualism, with our destruction of past knowledge, we have needed an application like this. So we can actually train ourselves. And that's where I think this is an extraordinary tool. And if you don't mind, Auburn, now we'll sort of go down the anomalies part.
There is, hang on, do you want to tell people your book? So if anybody is interested in reading about it.
Yeah, that's important.
From you guys, watching other videos, what the name of the book is?
It's available on Amazon, and basically you can order it from any book site, but it's called The Official Guide to Randonautica.
Right.
And,
And is there any way of getting a signed copy from you? But anyway.
I would love to send you a signed copy, yes.
Well, I wasn't asking for ourselves, but I'm sure lots of people, after witnessing that beautiful soul of yours and who you are, would love a signed copy themselves. But
so you said you were co-founders, so who's the other person that you co-founded this with?
Joshua Langfelder.
Acknowledgement.
Yeah, he's actually co-author with me on the book, and we're no longer partners. I ended up taking over the company. He went his own direction, and he's a very eccentric, big thinking man, brilliant. But ultimately, I think the kind of the structure of our business, he was like, he's not a structure guy. So
Yeah, right.
and we
He's an
in
outsider
order for
guy.
in order for I mean, we're I love our team so much. Just to like give them a shout out really quick if that's okay. So we
Yeah,
have
Of
absolutely.
course.
Tobias is our project manager. He's absolutely incredible. He lives in Israel now. He's just like chronically traveling with his wife and daughter. He's amazing.
Beautiful.
Such a beautiful soul. And then we have Taha Faraz. He's our front end developer, and Ziad Siddiqui is our back end developer. And then we have Emily and Vicky on our team, and Carrie does our design. That's how small we are.
Wow.
We're like just a tiny team of like people who really love doing this and are like very passionate about it. We've never hired like anybody. Everyone has came organically to like help and be part of it.
Yeah.
And we've never had a marketing budget. We've never been funded by anybody. A lot of people thought that we were like Google's pet project or something like that.
Right.
Like, nope. Just like, I mean, like if anybody's funding it, it's me. It's just
Right.
that's
What
it.
a
So
remarkable.
we're very grassroots, and that's the way I feel like it should
Organic.
be.
Well, it should be organic because
It's the only way it's
thing
going to
is
stay
so
together
organic.
and work.
You know
too.
what I mean? Yeah.
Is to have
Yeah.
that family thing. I mean, we work as entertainers in so many venues that don't give a damn about their staff. Their
Yeah.
morale is shot to pieces. And when I come in to DJ like a crazy clown, I dress up as a priest and run around with the radio mic acting like a scepter and follow people around and ask for confessions whilst I'm doing sort of slamming dream pop into noise music just to keep people alive and have a bit of a giggle. It picks the morale up. You need to have an industry, a company where everyone supports each other. And it sounds like this is that incredible hub for this profound idea to grow in.
Yeah.
So cheers to
All
your
right.
staff. And you know what? In
Thank
less than
you.
3
Thank you for
minutes
being
there,
fans.
we deconstructed the myths around
We
Randonautica.
really did.
Yeah, we did it.
There you go.
So we are in the midst of a conundrum. We're the only people in charge of the entire Southern Hemisphere for the Untold
Well, for
Radio
the
Network.
moment, yeah.
And
Yeah.
we are dealing with a whole lot of researchers of Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yowie, Yeti, they call it in our country. And we're dealing with a few people there that deal into the peripheries of the paranormal. But there are two camps, as I was saying a bit before the podcast to you there. And there's one camp that's sort of there. I think their intention at times is there and not. And I don't want to throw too much shade on them.
You shouldn't throw any shade.
But they are distinctly wanting to keep their credibility and say we're looking at a relic hominid that actually is there and it's physical.
Blood and bone, yeah.
It's blood and bone. And
Yeah.
the only way to actually protect it is to maybe cut its head off one day and then show the world that this
Well, get a
evidence
body.
exists.
They need to get a body, so they have to shoot one.
And then you've got the other side is the woo factor, where you have people that realize that they go out there and they actually see lights. They have all these shamanistic anomalous
there's
experiences.
an anomalous factor to this.
There's another
thing.
factor to this. And what we've realized after decades of doing research, you know, we just finished a TV series here called Close Encounters Down Under, where we created it basically as a guide around the country, is that when people go out with the right intent, they have much more positive, profound experiences. And a lot of these guys that actually find themselves being a researcher over there thinking this is a relic hominid may have a moment where they actually look at this thing through their rifle sights and see it actually resembles a human being more than it does a wild animal. And they have what you were saying may have occurred with some of the people utilizing your app. They have what we have come to know as consensus reality collapse. So because they're seeing something that they're told doesn't exist, cannot exist, their whole world goes down tomorrow. And it's amazing. They might have come from generations of a wilderness hunting community. They're no longer using a gun. They don't go into the woods anymore. And this collapse occurs. Has there anyone that you're aware of utilize this app? Because they're all searching for this thing and they were going to remote areas. have they utilized it in cryptozoology research for unknown
Cryptids. Well, there's a lot of them out there.
Yeah.
So,
Yes.
you know,
I mean, certainly they have. We have, so in our app, we have it's the social feed. It's called
Mhm.
Discover, where people can go and post all their pictures and their stories.
right.
And people certainly go out looking for Bigfoot and Sasquatch and aliens and all sorts.
Okay.
We haven't had anything that's been truly anomalous. I would say that there's probably been some more like very surreal type of abstract UFO type of situations. There's been a handful of those. I do know that someone came up to a yard that had a Bigfoot board in it.
All right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Like
Okay.
it was not the real Bigfoot. It was just like a yard ornament, which is freaking hilarious. But I don't know that anyone's using it like, they're out in a forest where there's been a sighting before
Mhm,
and they're being more strategic about it. I'm not sure. Did you get me on this show just to find out how to use the app to find?
No.
No.
You know what? I
No.
got well, that could have been
No,
part of
we
my
didn't.
unconscious
No, we did
intention.
not.
Excuse me,
No,
Auburn.
but that's like, we were thinking about it. It's like, well, if you can use it as, apply it to finding, like your intent for something for your personal. Has anybody come across, actually utilized it for that specific
You know what?
purpose?
In our heart of hearts, we don't have a hypothesis on any of this phenomena. We have dealt with so many people that have had experiences that are really difficult to actually understand or place into a reality context. But we actually, because of therapists, we actually seen signs of post-traumatic stress disorder. We see signs of actual, trouble for them psychologically that can't occur from an hallucination, can't occur from a nightmare, that are there because definitely something has occurred to them. So we're aware that to a great extent, they're having real experiences. And I mean, there were people like Professor John Mack, who was the head of Harvard psychiatry, who wrote 2 books on the abduction scenario, saying that we're actually looking here at something that looks like a genuine physical experience. And sometimes these physical experiences, they destroy the notion of physics to us. When people can be lifted up out of their bed and go through a solid wall, how can we ever come to grips with that reality? It defies everything that we understand about the 3-dimensional universe.
Right.
But we saw this and thought, my God, all these people we listen to week in, week out that are searching, maybe if they had the right intention and they used Randonautica, that they would actually find what they're looking
come across
for.
it. Yeah.
But personally, Auburn, to you now, my wife and I, we'd actually prefer the Bigfoot is never found.
Oh, yeah.
We know it's there.
Yeah.
We just think the humanity is not up to a speed where they can deal with another conscious hominid that may be far more aware and wise than we are in terms of protecting the environment. So we don't care. And that might get me in a lot of strife, that statement.
Uh-oh. And
but I'm willing to say it to you now, because what I think is Randonautica could revolutionize the world of anomalous research. And where you would start with that, and Doug Hychek, who does this station, is in the midst of this profound documentary on Legend Meets Science, where they're actually kicking up new DNA evidence like eDNA, and they're using a whole lot new forms of technology. And I'm thinking, maybe they should actually get this app involved as well.
Yeah.
I mean, it's worth a try.
Won't hurt, that's for sure.
Yeah. Plus, I also want to get behind selling it to the entire cryptozoological world and just help you guys to get up there. That's the way I feel emotionally bonded to you now.
You know what's funny is that I think one of the things that we have in our FAQs are kind of like tips for randonauting and having success is that like there's a level of belief, like you have to like have a little bit of belief that you're going to find this thing that you're looking for. And when you start to look for it, it's like you have my most successful trips, or even when I'm doing it organically without the app, is when I have a knowingness that I'm going to find it. Like,
Right. Yeah.
I'm on my way to find this thing, and it's a very present, it's an attitude, it's a state of being. I would imagine for people, especially if there's a collective people and a collective memory of people seeking a thing that they cannot find, that it becomes so hard for them to find. And the knowledge behind this thing is that it is hard to find, and it is hard to get on video, or it's hard to capture, or whatever. That could essentially stronghold the collective memory, therefore making it very difficult to find it, because the state of being is that it cannot be found. That is already the state of being. That's what you're creating. You're literally creating it's not being foundness. So it's like they all need to go to some therapy.
They need to loosen up.
They need to go, all right, guys, today's the day. And they're all going out and they had a different attitude about, it's like, I don't know. There's something there, though, I think, with even like other people like seeking UFOs and wanting to find aliens. And it's like once the collective consciousness holds this idea that it's really impossible to find, or it only makes that worse. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah.
It takes us having the belief and knowing that it's really possible as a majority. And then I feel like it starts to trickle in way easier. And then all of a sudden we're just living in a world where we're walking around Bigfoot and a bunch of fucking UFOs flying around.
Yeah.
It's much collective,
I have a friend who lives in a very isolated area. He was part of a band with me. I had a band together in the 80s. I was actually experiencing lots of great musicians that had breakdowns, and they weren't on the stage again. And in some cases, they couldn't even turn their Casio keyboard on in the nursing home they were there because they were playing discordant chords. Everyone was trying to be weird. And I thought, okay, I'm going to throw these musicians up onto a stage. The only power I've got is to bridge over troubled water into venues, and I can give them amplification. I can give them a voice, and I can also say two hoots to the notion of music. Let's become abstract on avant-garde. This will work for all of us. I would actually see incredible things occur with those members in that band when they actually were on stage. I would see what was permanent damage from things like Monocape, which was an oil-based tranquilizer, tartar dyskinesia. I would see that dissipate in the midst of that, and something else take over. So I think that this app could actually be very similar to that. It could change the neurology of the way that we perceive things. It could make us respect things a lot more and be more aware of the moment we're in and how precious that moment is. Not to be always thinking about what we can gain next, what we need to own, what the neighbors have got, how we're looking at, how many clicks we're getting, but to be aware of the environment we're in and be touched by it and be so grateful for the fact that we are alive and that we're well. And, I think that only benefit can come from Randonautica. I am an avid Randonautica fan that doesn't own a phone.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you.
And I guess the thing is, you've got a very clear and detailed website. Maybe give people that address to that website and any other information you'd like people to be aware of about this incredible device.
Yeah. So our website is randonautica.com. It's somewhat under construction right now, but there's plenty of information there from the history. You could read about like the Fatum guys. They were like the original researchers, super great guys that we're still in contact with and use their algorithm. You could learn how our app actually derives like truly anomalous points. So like we're not just randomizing like Google Maps. We're literally looking at a bunch of dots on a bunch of dots that have essentially been created using a quantum random number generator. And then we're trying to find what those dots did weird. Like, did a bunch of dots cluster together? Did a bunch of dots accidentally be very far apart? Like, we're looking for oddities in it. And then we put that over your map. So we're dealing with something that's way, way subatomic. We're not just looking at like the digital technological side. So you could learn more about like the algorithm that we use and kind of the nature of that process there. Ultimately, though, like what I want people to know about randonauting is that even if it's not the woo side, like you may not be someone who needs to know that you can have an effect on reality or reality is effective with you at the same time. You may not need to know that, but there's something so awesome about going on a random adventure. Like it is fun and it is like for all ages. You just, when you don't know where you're going, and always be safe and be aware. You can't just be like willy-nilly out in the, you know, some dangerous area or anything. But when you are going on an adventure, it feels like you're a child again. And it is really wholesome and healing and super special. And so I hope that people will generate a point and just go there for fun. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, you're probably going to have some kind of experience, whether that's mundane, it's just, oh, I didn't find anything. But guess what? You got out and you did something random today.
Exactly.
Or I found something huge and it means a lot. And then that's life-changing, right? So I just love the spectrum of possibilities with Randonautica.
I think too, I don't think we realize after a while that we can be trapped in our everyday rituals.
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
And we can
Our
lose
routines,
respect.
And our mind.
Yeah, and our mind, and
Our
lose
thoughts.
respect for those around us and everything that we have. And we can gain new insights into that, basically. Now, one other little question I was going to ask you that might have tipped the conspiratorial thinking of mine over the deep end, and that was your use of an owl in the insignia that's tilting its head. Because I think anyone that's sort of gone down the rabbit hole, and lots of people have recently, especially with the Bohemian Grove motif of Moloch the owl there.
I know.
Why did the owl? I think owls. You know, owls actually appear consistently in abduction scenarios.
Yeah, gray owls, right?
Yeah, big time.
They go back in fairy folklore as well.
All totally.
Or it could be just a wise owl, you know. An owl can be just an owl.
It's an owl looking from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I'm sure. So the story that I know, because the owl was around like I came a few months after all this had started, but the owl was already in place.
Right.
And I had the same thought, like, what's the deal with this owl? And the story is that the owl is about transformation. It's about being able to see in the dark. Right. So we're walking around blindly, and something about Randonautica helps you to start seeing things, your blind spots in life, to this place in your neighborhood you never even knew existed before, for example. And then its head's tilted because it was supposed to look like curious. That was the designer's idea, was for it to be like a curious owl who sees in the dark, like how symbolic. And then when I came on board, I was like, you guys, that owl looks like its neck's broke. And I think we should probably like make it a little bit more simplified. Like this is just in case we go viral or something, or like people really start using our app, I feel like we should fix the owl. So eventually we did. And now we have a more, I would say
palatable owl.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So.
How beautiful is that? Thank you for that explanation. Look, we are so excited. Plus, we're also so grateful to you for your time and the ability to do this podcast. I'm not sure if we're going to pick your amazing numbers up that app has received, but I am certainly going to push it as hard as I can into the world of anomalous research.
Well, and I'll share your podcast too. We'll make sure to share it on all of our socials.
That'd be great.
And I would love, if it's possible at all, to come back to you in about 6 months' time and
Sure.
tell you what effect that we may have had with Randonautica, and we're going to go out and use that app ourselves. I suggest to people that if you're going in to use that app, exercise caution. It's a
Absolutely.
big wild world out there. Respect everything that's written on the site about using that application, and it'll tell you if you come to a fence or a cliff, don't go over there to check on that like people have done. You know,
Like,
respect.
seriously, you need to be told
Well,
not
I
to
think
go over
some
a
people
cliff?
do. They might think the app is
Maybe if you
sending
have to
there.
be told not to go over a cliff, you should go over.
Oh, no, please
Like,
don't say that.
seriously.
Don't say that.
No, truly.
Don't put that out there.
We don't need people like that. You got to go.
But you know what? The point of fact is to respect it. Go out there in the daylight and look for something sweet
Absolutely.
for yourself. I love that lady that set out in her own suburb to actually
purple?
find an enchanted
Oh, yeah,
garden.
the purple. I love that.
Have you seen that clip where she finds an enchanted, like, fairy garden? The
In her
door
neighborhood?
swings open.
Was it all purple?
Yes, the
Yes.
purple. Yeah, the purple.
And
Yeah.
she actually faints and collapses into
That
the
was
purple.
me, you guys.
Oh, you kidding? That was
That
you.
was me.
Oh, that is incredible. And that was genuine?
Absolutely.
it
Oh, wow.
was.
Wow.
Wow.
We were so touched by that.
Oh my
we
gosh.
love that story.
I'll tell, like, you have to link to that story because it is like one of my
Let's put a
favorite
link there
random
to
trips.
it.
But
Mhm.
I ended up having to contact the woman of the yard so
yard.
that we could use the footage because I was totally trespassing. Do
You were
not trespass.
trespassing. You broke
like,
the rules.
I couldn't not do it. It was like magical. Like I felt like I was in, it was so surreal, like Alice in Wonderland feeling. But I had to contact her like after when we were going to put this out and say, hey, you know, like, we'll pay you what we need to. We want to use this footage of your backyard. At first she was like, you are my backyard. Like, what the hell, right? But then she goes on to tell me like this beautiful story about how she's been building this backyard and she actually had been handicapped. So like that was like her whole heart was in that backyard. And she always had this dream that a lot of people could see it.
Wow. There you go.
And a lot of people
And they did.
saw it. It was
Yeah.
so cool. So that's, I mean, I don't even know when I'm thinking about that now after not talking about that story for so long, it's giving me goosebumps and I'm just like, how did I get here? This is unreal.
Yeah.
That was so astounding.
It
And the
was,
fact
it
that you
was.
actually fainted too. And that
Yeah, I
you
think I
were
was-
so overawed by the experience.
It was, I mean, we chalked it up to like me not having enough food that day, but I think I ultimately feel like I was very like my energy was like very intense and there was so much happening and I just went.
You shut down.
Yeah. I just couldn't. My body like couldn't handle like my energy field or like my soul or whatever you want to call it. My higher self was just like, we're done now. You're off. Bye.
Wow,
We
there you
will put
go.
a link to it because that is, I mean, that really touched us emotionally.
It did.
Let
Yeah.
me tell you,
I love that story.
we were literally in tears over that story.
Oh
There was
my God.
there was a realization in there
Yeah.
of how powerful this is.
Yeah.
Because what you're doing is I mean, I keep saying this, you are flexing something that people don't realize this extraordinary potential they have. And you know, the most important thing to us in our life is the sadness of people that have incredible potential, but their backgrounds, their environment, their economics
just holds them back. Yeah.
Right.
And a whole lifetime they're unaware of that.
Yeah.
And all our events we try and keep evidently even really cheaply or for virtually no money so we can get people in there, find out where they're at and assist them in some way or another.
Emotionally.
We realized we had to meet people halfway.
Mhm.
You know, I was out there as I did drug and alcohol stuff, but I realized let's get in the nightclubs, let them take their drugs, but also tell them they don't need to kill themselves to have one good night's entertainment.
Yeah,
So that was always part of our motivation.
Mhm.
But that episode, we were literally in tears.
Yeah, we were.
And we just were
loved that.
spellbound.
That one stuck the most with us.
And so
You
what I
know
was
mean?
going to let on to you that what I wasn't going to say initially, both of us had assumed in the beautiful world of having torn these neurological pathways into one way of thinking, we thought you might have been a man.
A man.
So we
Male.
when we heard Auburn. So I didn't click with what I was really. So we went, my God. And, you know, bang. How stupid of us to
when
think
you
that
said,
way.
I'm going to put my makeup on, we went,
is it Christian? Are we talking?
No, we're talking to a drag queen. we just didn't even. Do you know what I mean? It's just so bizarre the way we've been conditioned that it clearly
So
can't be a woman.
excuse us, and our apologies. We didn't even want to say that
Jamie,
to you.
Auburn is a woman's name. It's a female name. What is wrong with you?
You know, it's also a suburb in Sydney. Auburn
is it really?
Yeah,
it is.
It's about 10 kilometres up the road from us. So, have you
Anyway.
been to Australia?
No, I want to.
All right, we're going to get you touring here, and we're going to
here.
take you to Auburn for lunch.
There's a lot.
And I'll randonaut there.
Yeah, we're all randonauting there.
I am doing international randonauting now. I just was in Barcelona and England, and I randonauted there, and it was crazy. But I'll tell you this, it disjointed my reality a little bit.
Really?
That happens. Yes. Not to open a new topic. I think you guys are trying to wrap up, but
well, you know,
it's pretty bizarre. Like I went from it. I don't know how to describe it. I'm not sure if anything's ever happened to you guys like this, but it's happened to me quite a few times when I'm on video randonauting, which I do very infrequently now. So the last time I would have done it was 2 years ago, but I did it last week in Barcelona, and it's like life changes ever so slightly. These ripples, something does something. There in one of the videos I was watching on the Morphogenic Resonance, he was talking about how these balls have a pathway, and if they're disrupted somewhere on this hill, it doesn't matter because they'll fall back onto their pathway. And I feel like sometimes high energy or like a big experience randonauting can just like move your ball a little too much.
Right.
And you feel that in your life. But
yes, of course.
I think that the hope is that like your ultimate, hopefully the betterment is the end, and it's not like, you know, putting you somewhere in not a good place, if that makes sense.
But
and I think that's just you know, it's again what we deal with, the fallout in anomalous experience, that a lot of people have that same feeling, and why we're there is not to necessarily investigate that sighting, but to make sure they can integrate that feeling back into everyday life, because we've still got to get on with the show.
Yeah, we do.
Exactly.
And so you can't be disjointed for too long. But I think that's just a side effect of the conditioning placed on that. And again, this is just an assumption, but I feel like, hey, it's a positive side effect, and you'll work through it. And you are that higher being that's already on that level to ascension. We both feel.
I think, sometimes that disjointing just clicks you over into some other. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To see something a little bit more, but in tiny little increments, because if you go straight into somewhere totally.
That's where your post-traumatic stress
That's
disorder
where it
comes
totally
from.
freaks you out. And this way it could be just a little increment that sort of goes, okay, yeah. Okay, I can deal with this. This is all right. And then I'll get back onto the path. You know what I mean? So, but those little increments are the way to do us, because when we've got our minds have been so conditioned into this box that this is what we know, this is how it is. And if we are presented with something that is just totally, we haven't even conceptualized, that's when our mind starts to like totally freak out and doesn't deal with it. So sometimes the universe will give you a tiny little, you know, click into something else that you can sort of integrate yourself. Otherwise, if it's too big, it just, you know, your worldview is shattered, and trying to get back on track is just so difficult, you know. Then you've got to go to therapy, and, you know, you've got to talk it out with someone, and, you know, I mean, that's great too, but sometimes, you know, you don't want to be too shattered.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly.
Like we said, you've got to get on with everyday life. You know, you've got to feed the kids, you've got to go to work, you've got to pay the bills, you know, to keep going, you know, and having these experiences. So, yeah.
Can you give all our respect and love to your staff and thank them all for what they're doing? We
Yes.
believe that this is a truly powerful enterprise and it is the app that could change the world if used respectfully and the way that we should treat each other.
Yes.
And, call a spade a spade. If you see trouble coming, get out of its way.
Run.
Get out of its
The other way.
Yeah. But you are just such a beautiful person to spend any time with, Auburn, and we just really appreciate it. So all power to you and your family and your staff. And we're going to get back to you in about 6 months' time.
We will check in with you and see, maybe we could talk about some stories, some things that have come up that can actually illustrate what we've been talking about, because I think it's it's an educational process, this to educate people to understand. And I think with the phone and how everybody's got phones, maybe this is a way to get them to understand that we are this collective, and we are greater than ourselves together, and that we need to be connected and really connected on a deeper, and we are connected on a really deep level that we just don't understand.
As the late Bill Hicks said, I mean, what is the human being? What is the hominid? But basically the subatomic particle structure of the universe that's always been there.
That's right.
You can't take anything away. You can't give it back.
No.
But we are that structure, consciously becoming aware of ourselves and philosophically contemplating our part in this universe. And when you think of it in that way, it is incredibly profound. And Astronautica could be the surfboard into that consciousness.
Yeah. Randonautica.
But you said Astronautica, and that sounds like randonauting in space, and I think that's really cool. So I'm in
there.
Well, that's the next destination.
Yeah, we have to sell that to Elon Musk. Don't let him get his hands on it. Actually,
he's not going anywhere.
Just get the application at every SpaceX launch. There's so much else I'd love to say, but we're taking your time up, and I don't want to do that. But I just want to say our hearts are truly with you.
Thank you so much. This has been such a great top podcast. I mean, normally people hit me with all these hard questions and they want to bring up articles from the New York Times, and I'm just like, ugh. This felt amazing. Thank you guys so much. Thank you for being so supportive. Thank you for sharing your hearts and your stories, and just I love it. So I would be more than honored to be on the show again.
Great.
In a few months or so, whenever you want me, just let me know.
Fabulous.
And it's a great privilege to spend time with you. Two other names that you may be aware of: the late Terence McKenna, who did a lot of psychedelic research. He is an incredible philosopher, and he'd be worth listening to. He was another exponent of the morphogenic resonance. And Robert Anton Wilson, the author, who was a very left-wing libertarian, but his approach to the mind at large is very similar too. And I think you'd find both those individuals philosophically.
I have so much. I have ingested so much of their content in my life that I don't know why. You know how sometimes we are looking for an answer for something for so long, and then it just takes you guys sending me a message about it, and then I'm like, oh, that's that thing that I was trying to explain, even though I kept reading it, kept seeing it, but I never could connect to the thing that I needed to connect it to.
Right.
That happened for me today. And I'm just totally vibing with you guys. So thank you so much. I won't, we get to keep going back and forth, and I know that, and I feel that, but I'll let you guys go. And please, I'm excited to talk to you again. And thank you so very, very much.
Awesome.
Well, we wish you have a lovely evening, pleasant dreams. And again, all our love to your staff, your family, and yourself, Auburn. It's been a real privilege and a pleasure to spend time with you.
Amazing. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Right. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. Well, we're going to do our sign off, and we will be back next week with I'm sure another interesting program.
Yeah, nothing's going to be this good.
You say that every week.
I know, but Auburn just blew me away.
She did
completely.
She was amazing.
Beautiful and profound, and she doesn't even need to put makeup on, for God's sake.
Doesn't.
We do.
All right, we'll be back next week. Bye.